These 10 disasters changed the world. Some happened because of mistakes, others because of lies. But they all share one thing: innocent people paid the price for someone else's decisions. In 1930, the small industrial town of Dinnora, Belgium, became the scene of one of the first major environmental disasters in modern history. A tragedy that revealed the deadly consequences of air pollution long before the world took it seriously. For 5 long days, a thick, yellowish fog covered the entire valley, bringing with it a silent killer that no one could escape. Dinnora was known for its steel and zinc factories. These plants emitted massive amounts of toxic gases, sulfur dioxide, fluorides, and heavy metal particles. Normally, the wind dispersed these emissions, but in late October 1930, a rare weather phenomenon trapped the air over the valley. A temperature inversion, when a layer of warm air sits above cooler air near the ground, sealed the pollutants in place, turning the town into a poisonous chamber. At first, people simply noticed that the fog was unusually dense and had a strange metallic smell. But soon, symptoms began: coughing, burning eyes, difficulty breathing. Livestock collapsed in the fields. Doctors were overwhelmed as residents suffered from acute respiratory distress. By the time the fog lifted, over 60 people were dead, and more than 6,000, nearly half the town's population, were seriously ill. The tragedy of Dinnora exposed a terrifying truth: the modern world's progress could poison itself. Yet at the time, industries refused to accept responsibility, calling it a natural phenomenon. It would take decades before governments began to regulate air quality. The disaster became a grim precursor to future environmental crises, like the London smog of 1952. Even today, the Great Smog of Dinnora stands as a haunting reminder that invisible dangers can be deadlier than war. What began as a quiet fog became a symbol of humanity's toxic relationship with industrial power, a warning that nature always collects its debt. In January 1961, the United States came dangerously close to destroying itself. Over the quiet farmlands of Goldsboro, North Carolina, a B-52 bomber carrying 2 hydrogen bombs, each more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima, broke apart in midair. What happened next nearly changed the course of human history. The bomber was on a routine flight when it suffered a catastrophic structural failure. As it disintegrated, 2 4-megaton Mark 39 hydrogen bombs fell toward the ground. One of them deployed its parachute and went through all but one step of its detonation sequence. Out of the bomb's 4 safety switches, 3 failed. If the last one had also malfunctioned, the explosion would have wiped out everything within a 30-kilometer radius and irradiated the entire East Coast. Witnesses on the ground reported a fiery explosion as debris rained from the sky. The Air Force immediately sealed off the area, and a secret recovery operation began. One bomb was recovered intact, hanging from a tree by its parachute. The other plunged deep into a swamp. Its uranium core still lies buried underground, sealed in place to this day. For years, the U.S. government denied just how close the nation came to disaster. It wasn't until a 2013 declassified report revealed the truth. A single low-voltage switch had prevented the bomb from detonating. In the words of the report's author, one simple, ordinary wire stood between the United States and a major catastrophe. The Goldsboro Incident remains one of the most chilling reminders of how fragile nuclear safety truly is. Thousands of similar accidents, euphemistically called broken arrows, have occurred worldwide, but none came as close as this one to erasing an entire region from the map. It wasn't war or an enemy that nearly destroyed America that day. It was a simple mechanical failure and a terrifying stroke of luck.
On the night of December 2, 1984, the city of Bhopal, India, became the site of the deadliest industrial disaster in human history. What began as a quiet evening turned into a nightmare when 40 tons of toxic gas leaked from a pesticide plant owned by Union Carbide Corporation, a US-based company. Within hours, thousands were dead, and the air itself became poison. The factory had long been operating under dangerous conditions: poor maintenance, broken safety systems, and undertrained workers. That night, a large quantity of water accidentally entered a storage tank containing methyl isocyanate, MIC, a deadly chemical used to make pesticides. The reaction caused a rapid rise in temperature and pressure, and the safety valves failed. At around midnight, a massive cloud of toxic gas burst out, rolling silently over sleeping neighborhoods. Those who inhaled it felt their throats burn, their eyes sear, and their lungs collapse. Entire families died in their beds before they could even wake up. Survivors remember the night as one of chaos, people running blindly through the streets, coughing blood, unable to breathe. By morning, over 3,000 people lay dead, and within weeks, the death toll had surpassed 15,000. Hundreds of thousands more suffered chronic illnesses, blindness, respiratory damage, and birth defects that persist even today. The surrounding soil and water remain contaminated, poisoning new generations. In the aftermath, Union Carbide and its executives faced outrage, but very little justice. The company paid a settlement of $470 million, a fraction of what was needed to rebuild lives. The plant's CEO never stood trial in India, and victims received meager compensation. The site itself was abandoned, becoming a decaying monument to corporate negligence. Decades later, activists continue to fight for cleanup and recognition. The area around the factory is still toxic. Children are born with deformities. Water tests show deadly levels of contamination, yet the world has largely moved on. The Bhopal disaster wasn't just a tragedy, it was a crime against humanity, a warning about what happens when profit outweighs safety and accountability. And the most horrifying part? It could happen again. On May 6, 1937, the German airship LZ-129 Hindenburg, the pride of Nazi Germany's aviation, approached the small airfield in Lakehurst, New Jersey. It was the largest flying machine ever built, a symbol of technological progress and national prestige. But within 34 seconds, it was reduced to a burning skeleton, crashing before the horrified eyes of journalists and onlookers. The disaster became one of the most iconic tragedies ever captured on film, and one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. The Hindenburg was filled with hydrogen, a highly flammable gas, because the US had banned the export of helium to Germany. Despite the risks, the Zeppelin made dozens of successful flights. That day, it was carrying 97 people, including wealthy passengers, Nazi officials, and journalists covering the landing. The atmosphere was calm until the moment of descent. As the airship began to moor, witnesses reported a small flash of light near the tail. In seconds, the enormous vessel was engulfed in flames. The inferno consumed the Zeppelin mid-air before it even touched the ground. Screams, chaos, and the now famous words of the reporter Herbert Morrison, "Oh, the humanity," were broadcast across the world. 36 people died, but miraculously, more than half survived, jumping from the fiery wreckage. What caused the explosion has been debated for decades. The official explanation: a static discharge ignited leaking hydrogen. But conspiracy theories soon followed. Some believed it was sabotage, meant to embarrass Nazi Germany before its propaganda tour in the US. Others pointed to lightning, fuel leaks, or even a secret American act of revenge for German espionage. New analyses suggest that the outer fabric of the airship, coated with a mixture of iron oxide and aluminum powder, acted like rocket fuel when ignited by static electricity. Still, no one can say with certainty what the initial spark was. The tragedy effectively ended the era of passenger airships. Overnight, humanity's dream of crossing the sky in majestic floating palaces turned into a symbol of fiery death. But the Hindenburg remains more than a historical accident. It's a haunting reminder of human arrogance, technological overconfidence, and the thin line between triumph and catastrophe.
In 1845, two mighty British ships, HMS Terror and HMS Erebus, set sail from England on a mission that symbolized the height of human ambition: to find and chart the Northwest Passage, a fabled sea route linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Arctic ice. The expedition was led by the seasoned explorer Sir John Franklin, and his 129 crewmen were equipped with the best technology of the age: steam engines, reinforced hulls, and even canned food, a modern innovation at the time. They were confident that the British Empire's mastery of science and navigation would conquer the frozen unknown, but none of them ever returned. The ships became trapped in thick Arctic ice near King William Island in 1846, and what happened next is one of the most chilling maritime mysteries in history. When rescue missions arrived years later, they found only haunting traces: abandoned camps, discarded clothing, and skeletal remains scattered across the tundra. Some bodies showed signs of cannibalism, suggesting that starvation and madness had overtaken the survivors as they tried to march south on foot. For more than a century, historians and explorers debated what doomed the Franklin expedition. Theories ranged from lead poisoning caused by poorly sealed canned food to scurvy, hypothermia, and even mutiny. But in 2014 and 2016, the mystery deepened and began to unravel when the wrecks of the Erebus and Terror were discovered, astonishingly well preserved beneath the Arctic waters. The ship's positions hinted that some crew members might have tried to sail again before succumbing to the cold. Artifacts found aboard, boots, journals, china, and even intact wine bottles, offered eerie glimpses into the final days of the crew. But many questions remain. Why did they abandon two seaworthy ships? Why did some march hundreds of kilometers into the wilderness, knowing death was certain? The Franklin expedition stands as a tragic symbol of human hubris against nature's cruelty, an epic tale of courage, desperation, and mystery still frozen in ice. Even today, the Arctic holds its secrets close, guarding the final moments of those 129 souls who dared to conquer it and vanished instead.
Deep beneath the quiet hills of Pennsylvania lies a fire that has been burning for over 60 years. A disaster so strange and unstoppable that it turned a once bustling mining town into a modern ghost city. This is the story of Centralia, a place that time and fire refused to extinguish. In 1962, workers at a landfill site near the small town accidentally ignited an underground coal seam. What began as a minor blaze quickly spread through the vast network of abandoned coal mines beneath Centralia. The flames moved silently, devouring oxygen and spewing toxic gases through cracks in the earth. The townspeople at first thought it would die out, but the fire only grew stronger, spreading mile after mile underground. Soon, strange things began to happen. Smoke and steam poured from the ground. Sinkholes opened suddenly, swallowing trees, fences, and even parts of roads. The soil became hot enough to melt car tires, and deadly levels of carbon monoxide made the air unbreathable. In 1981, a 12-year-old boy nearly fell into a sinkhole that opened beneath his feet, its depths glowing with red fire. That moment shocked the nation. By the 1980s, the government declared Centralia unsafe. Most residents were forced to evacuate, their homes demolished, their lives erased. Only a handful of stubborn souls refused to leave, clinging to the memories of a town that no longer existed. The fire still burns today, hidden beneath the surface, moving slowly through the coal veins. Experts estimate it could continue for another 200 to 250 years before finally burning out. The eerie remains of Centralia inspired horror movies and games, most famously Silent Hill. Roads are split and cracked, graffiti covers the ruins, and steam still rises from vents in the earth like the breath of something alive. Centralia stands as a haunting reminder of how a single careless act can unleash a disaster that outlives generations, and how sometimes the world's scariest fires are the ones we can't see.
On the morning of April 16, 1947, the quiet port city of Texas City, Texas, became the scene of one of the most catastrophic industrial explosions in history. What began as an ordinary day at the docks ended with an explosion so massive it was heard 150 miles away, flattening buildings, igniting ships, and killing nearly 600 people. It all started aboard a French cargo ship, the SS Grand Camp, which was docked and being loaded with ammonium nitrate fertilizer, the same highly explosive substance later used in bombings decades afterward. Around 8 a.m., smoke was seen rising from one of the ship's holds. Dock workers tried to smother the flames, even sealing the hatch to cut off oxygen. But this only turned the vessel into a giant pressure cooker. At 9:12 a.m., the ship erupted in a blinding fireball. The explosion vaporized the Grand Camp, instantly killing hundreds of people nearby. A 15-foot tidal wave swept over the docks, and pieces of the ship were hurled miles away. One 2-ton anchor was found nearly 2 miles inland. The blast shattered windows as far as Houston and Galveston. Fires spread across oil refineries and chemical plants, triggering secondary explosions that burned for days. The heat was so intense that railroad cars melted, and firefighters, many of whom had rushed to the scene, were themselves caught in the subsequent blasts. But the horror wasn't over. The next day, a second ship, the High Flyer, also loaded with ammonium nitrate, caught fire and exploded, compounding the devastation. By the time the smoke cleared, more than 5,000 people were injured, and half of Texas City was gone. The blast left a crater 15 feet deep and 200 feet wide, marking the site of the first major industrial accident involving a chemical chain reaction of this scale. The Texas City disaster forever changed safety regulations around hazardous materials. Yet even today, many who visit the site describe an eerie silence, a place where the air itself seems to remember the explosion that once tore a city apart.
On September 21, 2001, just 10 days after the attacks on the World Trade Center, the city of Toulouse, France, was rocked by one of the most powerful industrial explosions in modern Europe. At precisely 10:17 a.m., a massive detonation tore through the AZF chemical factory, leaving behind a crater 50 meters wide and shaking buildings across the entire city. Windows shattered miles away, cars flipped, and thousands thought the apocalypse had come. The explosion killed 31 people and injured over 2,500, but what made this disaster especially chilling was how little anyone could explain afterward. The official stories spoke of a tragic accident involving ammonium nitrate, the same compound later responsible for the Beirut explosion in 2020. Yet from the very beginning, nothing about the event seemed ordinary. Witnesses described a bright flash, 2 distinct blasts, and a strange metallic smell in the air. Some workers claimed they saw a man flee the warehouse moments before the explosion, a detail that was quickly dismissed. Others noted that the blast occurred in a section of the plant where incompatible chemicals were not supposed to be stored together. At first, panic swept the nation. France feared it was another terrorist attack coming so soon after 9/11. Investigators, soldiers, and intelligence agents flooded the site. But despite years of inquiry, no definitive cause was ever established. The company insisted it was an accident. Many locals, however, remained unconvinced. Theories soon multiplied. Some believed it was industrial sabotage. Others claimed military experiments were being conducted nearby. A few even linked the explosion to classified research contracts between the plant and defense organizations. Every attempt to close the case only raised more questions. The blast's power was so immense that it registered as a small earthquake on seismic stations across Europe. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. Schools, hospitals, and homes were reduced to rubble. The city of Toulouse, known for its aerospace industry and quiet charm, was suddenly compared to a war zone. Even 2 decades later, survivors say they still don't believe the full truth has been told. For them, the AZF explosion is more than an industrial accident. It's a mystery of negligence, silence, and unanswered questions. In the early morning of December 4, 1913, France witnessed one of the deadliest train disasters in its history, the Montereau Rail Catastrophe. It was a time when Europe's railways symbolized progress, speed, and the promise of modernity. Yet that day, just a few miles from Paris, a tragic chain of mistakes and mechanical failures turned a passenger express into a fiery tomb. The Paris-Nice Express had left the capital packed with holiday travelers. Heavy fog blanketed the tracks, drastically reducing visibility. But railway officials, eager to maintain tight schedules, refused to delay departures. Behind the express, a mail train was sent out, running dangerously close to the first. As the express slowed down near Montgeron station, the following train hurtled through the mist at full speed, over 100 kilometers per hour. The signalman's warnings went unseen. Within seconds, the mail train slammed into the back of the passenger cars, releasing an explosion of twisted metal, fire, and screams. The wooden carriages shattered like matchsticks. The impact was so violent that 4 carriages instantly ignited, and flames spread before rescuers could arrive. Many victims were trapped inside the burning wreckage. The final toll was devastating, more than 70 dead and dozens severely injured. Witnesses later recalled hearing the cries of those who couldn't escape as the fire consumed the train. What made the tragedy even more haunting was how preventable it was. Investigations revealed multiple failures, outdated braking systems, lack of communication between stations, and the decision to prioritize punctuality over safety. The public outcry was immense. Newspapers across Europe described the disaster as a symbol of arrogance, where human life was sacrificed for speed. In the aftermath, France introduced major reforms in railway safety, including better signaling systems, automatic brakes, and stricter spacing between trains. The Montgeron crash became a turning point, a grim reminder that the race for progress can turn deadly when caution is ignored. Today, the site near Montgeron remains marked by a small memorial. Locals say that on foggy mornings, the distant echo of a train whistle can sometimes still be heard, as if the rails themselves remember the day when speed overtook reason. On April 15, 1989, what was supposed to be a joyful day for football fans turned into one of the darkest tragedies in British sports history. During an FA Cup semi-final match between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest at the Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield, chaos erupted in the stands, and within minutes, 97 people were dead. At first, no one understood what was happening. Thousands of fans had been packed into a standing section behind steel fences, a common design at the time. But poor crowd control, locked exits, and a last-minute rush caused a deadly human crush. People were pressed so tightly together that they couldn't breathe or move. Some died standing up, crushed by the weight of others. Police on the ground didn't open the gates in time, and emergency response was disastrously slow. For over 20 minutes, the crowd screamed for help while live television broadcast the horror.
Families watching at home saw their loved ones trapped behind metal barriers, waving desperately for air. What followed was even more shocking than the tragedy itself: a massive cover-up. Officials and police blamed the victims, claiming fans were drunk and violent. Newspapers repeated those lies. The real truth, that poor planning, police negligence, and stadium design were to blame, was buried for decades. Only years later, after relentless efforts by families and journalists, did new investigations expose the truth. The Hillsborough Independent Panel in 2012 revealed that police had altered more than 160 witness statements to hide their failures. It was one of the largest public deceptions in British history. The tragedy forced sweeping changes in stadium safety and crowd control, including the removal of fenced standing terraces from major venues. But for the families of the 97 victims, justice came painfully late, and for some, never at all. The Hillsborough Disaster remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the real horror doesn't come from accidents. It comes from lies, denial, and silence.